Hello there, Drew Hanish of Whiskey Lore. It's time for another whiskey tasting. And today, doing a tasting of Kilchoman, Machir Bay. And Machir Bay is a bay that's nearby the distillery. This is Islay's farm distillery, as it says on the bottle. They actually, I'm going to correct something I said recently. I said that Springbank does everything on site and that they're the only distillery that does that in Scotland. That's not true. Kilchoman does everything except they do floor maltings, but they also get some of their barley from Port Ellen down the street. So they're not 100%, but I think we could pretty much say grain to glass. These guys are really close. Family-owned distillery as well. And this is as close as I can get to saying a flagship probably for Kilchoman, because you tend to see this everywhere that you go. When you look at this whiskey, you see that it is a very light color, and that is because they're not using any colorant in this at all. It's non-chill filtered, and I'm wearing a gray tie, which means that it's smoky. And there's a couple of different whiskeys, and sooner or later I'll do a tasting on Sanaig. I think I did a comparison video with Sanaig at one point, but we'll go back and do a by itself video at some point. This is a whiskey that I hadn't had, and I really love the Sanaig. And so when a friend of mine brought a bottle of this over to the house, because he had just bought it, and we were doing some tastings, and I had a bottle of something, and I forget what it was, but I wasn't overly pleased with it, but he liked it. And this, he wasn't overly pleased with, but I liked it, and so we decided to swap bottles. So that's how I ended up with this bottle of Kilchoman. And I will be right out front with you on this, that this is not as dynamic a whiskey to me as Sanaig is. Yes, this is aged in Oloroso sherry casks, but not for very long. I mean, it's like they might touch it there for a little while. This is non-aged stayed whiskey, so I'm not sure how long it stays in casks total. But I think there's a lot more bourbon cask influence on this whiskey than the Oloroso sherry, and that comes through in the nosing and the tasting, which I'm going to do right now. So on the nose, I get smoke. I get that medicinal. In fact, it's probably more iodine-y than any of the other whiskeys that I have tried since I first started getting into Islay whiskeys. And that was McClellan, I think, was the first one. It was just a cheap Islay whiskey, and it smelled like a Band-Aid. This has a little bit of that. It's not overly aggressive, but I really have to tell you that if you're not a big smoke fan, you're not going to like this whiskey, because smoke is the predominant thing on the nose. That said, this is not Octomore, this is not Wee Beastie. This is a nice, gentle, pleasant, smoky, briny, peated whiskey. And there's little hints of citrus peel in the background that I get on this whiskey. The smoke is sort of a sweet, light, bacony kind of a smoke, along with that bit of iodine that comes in. Cheers. On the palate, initially I get vanilla, lemon, and then that smoke, a little bit of char comes in. The lemon still hangs in there, and it is a lingering finish. It's not really giving up the smoke, and that vanilla stays along for the ride, and then you get kind of this nice toasty kind of a finish. Little char, little bitter char in there, but only just a hair. It's not overly strong. And then I actually got a little cocoa note in there as well. But from front to back, this is just a nice, pleasant, smoky whiskey. It never gets overly aggressive. It never wimps out. It just gives you a nice, even expression all the way through. Maybe a little mint on the finish I'm picking up all of a sudden. And that was a delayed reaction because I just started noticing that mint coming through there a little bit on the end, kind of like the innards of a Andes candy, not the chocolatey part. Although, like I say, it does have that little chocolate note that I picked up in there. But the star of the show on this whiskey, front to back, like I say, is pretty much that medicinal smoke along with a bit of citrus, lemon that kind of follows you throughout. So I like it. Personally, I think it's a really interesting whiskey. I have an experiment I'm doing with this whiskey, and you will see it not too long from now. I have blended it with something else, and we're going to see how that turns out. Could be a train wreck, could be really great, but the reason why I wanted to use this in a blend is because if there is a whiskey that has a certain character to it, and I just want to add a smoke experience to it, this is the whiskey I'm probably going to use to do that, because there's not a lot of other stuff going on in here. There's that citrus note. So if I can find a whiskey that has a nice citrus body to it, but it feels like if it had some smoke to it, it might, add to the interest of that whiskey, then I would do that addition. So we'll see how that goes, and that video will be coming up not too long from now. If you enjoyed the video, give me a like and subscribe if you'd like to see more of these videos down the road. Feel free to leave your comments. If you have Machir Bay, what do you think? Is it your favorite of the Kilchoman line? Do you run scared from it? What is the situation? I appreciate it, and until next time, cheers and Slainte. That mint Andes candy actually comes in a little bit earlier than, interesting, the more I pay attention to it, the more it actually comes a little earlier in the process there. Nice.